I usually come here on Wednesday mornings, not for the coffee. I don't even like it that much, but because the quiet makes the hum of my own thoughts bearable. Today, the place smells like old pastries and the faint tang of bleach from the counter. She's behind it, the woman who used to babysit me. My stomach twists when I realize I haven't seen her in, I don't know, 10 years? Your usual? She asks before I even reach the counter. Her voice hasn't changed. It's the same soft, slightly teasing tone that made me squirm as a kid when she wagged a finger at me. I nod, a little too quickly. My hands fidget with the strap of my bag, and I catch myself folding the corner of a napkin I wasn't using. She smirks, and for a second, it feels like she knows every dumb thing I ever did. Black, right? No sugar. Yeah, thanks. I glance down, suddenly self-conscious about the way my sleeve has bunched up. When I look back, she's arranging cups, her hands moving with quiet precision, and for a moment I think she notices me noticing her. Her eyes flick up, just a brush of a glance, but long enough for my chest to tighten. I sit near the window, nursing a lukewarm coffee, pretending to scroll through my phone. I've got a draft text open that I'll never send, words carefully constructed and never delivered. Habit, maybe. Or maybe it's just that I've gotten used to these half gestures of connection that never have to land. She moves past my table, carrying a tray, and I catch a whiff of her perfume. Lavender, maybe, or something floral that isn't cheap. My elbow nudges the edge of the table, and I reach out reflexively, then pull back. I notice she's paused at the counter, watching a customer, but the way her gaze lingers a fraction too long on me makes me turn my head too quickly. We talk, barely. She comments on the weather. I make a lame joke about the city never really being dry. There's a pause, a tiny silence between us, the kind that feels like it could crack open into something bigger or fizzle out entirely. I flick my eyes toward her hands as she stacks cups. There's a ring on her finger I hadn't noticed before, and I wonder if it matters, if I'm allowed to notice at all. See you tomorrow? She asks as she wipes a counter that doesn't need it. Yeah, I murmur, more automatic than confident. My words stumble over the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I don't know if I'm saying it for me or to fill the space between us. I leave with my coffee, walking slowly down the street, noticing the way the sunlight pools on the pavement. My phone buzzes, and I almost drop it. A new message from an unknown number. Didn't know you still came here. Want to meet after work? I stop walking, thumb hovering over the screen. My heart punches a little harder than it should. Part of me wants to reply immediately. Part of me wants to set the phone down and pretend this is just a coincidence, a trick of timing. I glance back at the cafe, half expecting to see her watching from the window. She's not. But the memory of her glance lingers, and somehow, that's enough to make me pause mid-step, staring at nothing in particular, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And then, without thinking, I type a single word. Yes, that I showed up after work, just past 6, and the cafe had that half-empty hush that always makes small talk feel bigger than it is. She was behind the counter, humming softly to herself, a ritual I remembered from childhood that somehow still made the room feel safer. You came, she said, more statement than question. Her eyes flicked toward mine, like she was measuring something she wasn't saying. I smiled, awkwardly, like I always do when I want to seem casual but care too much. Yeah, thought I'd grab a tea. Sit a little, I said. My hands traced the rim of the cup as I sat down, noticing the chipped edge I'd never bothered to repair in my apartment. She poured the tea and placed it in front of me. Her fingers lingered on the handle longer than necessary, just a touch, and I caught my breath. The steam rose between us, smelling faintly of chamomile and something warm, homey. You remember the time you made me wear that ridiculous hat? I said, surprising myself. The memory came unbidden, the day I'd insisted I was too cool for her Saturday afternoon arts and crafts projects. She laughed softly, shaking her head. I remember. You were impossible, but I liked that stubbornness, even then. The words hung. A compliment? Nostalgia? I didn't reply right away, only watched her hands fold a napkin with a meticulous patience that made me imagine all the years she spent being careful, holding things together. There's a line we both know not to cross. She's in her 40s, divorced, with routines and memories I can't fully enter. And yet, I feel seen, in ways I didn't know I needed. My own apartment feels emptier after this, my unsent texts more conspicuous, my small rituals of solitude suddenly quieter. Do you ever regret staying here? I ask, because the words float out before I can censor them. She pauses, her gaze flicking to the window, and then back at me. Sometimes, she says, but I like knowing the place isn't just walls. People come, people leave, and occasionally, someone unexpected sits down. I imagine her life without me in it, the empty chair in front of the counter, her hands turning a cup of tea as though she's folding memories into it. And I imagine us crossing some invisible line, the awkwardness, the shame, the impossible longing. But I can't stop myself from leaning a little closer, the scent of her perfume wrapping around the edges of my hesitation. She notices, I think, because her hand hovers over the counter near mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then retreats. A subtle, unspoken gesture, but it presses against the tension in the air like a key fitting a lock. I imagine reaching for it, and not pulling away. Instead, we sit in silence. The clock ticks. The tea steams. The cafe hums quietly around us. And in that quiet, I feel something shift, like gravity tilting imperceptibly. When she finally looks up, her lips twitch in a smile almost too small to see. "Don't go too far tonight," she says, lightly, almost joking. But the way her eyes linger, soft and warm, tells me it isn't just a joke. I nod, feeling it. That tiny, aching recognition that maybe the rules don't matter if this moment counts. And for the first time in a long time, I don't look at my phone, don't imagine the unsent texts, don't think about what comes next. I just let her presence be enough. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me that I came in later than usual that Thursday, the city already folding into evening. The cafe smelled like rain and coffee, that comforting mix that made the place feel smaller than it really was. She was behind the counter, arms crossed over her apron, glancing at a notebook, lips pursed. "You're late," she said, not looking up. The words were light, almost teasing, but the edge in her tone made me tense. My hands fidgeted with the strap of my bag. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or something else. "Traffic," I muttered. "Too easy, too lame," but I couldn't think of anything better. She shrugged, still absorbed in the notebook. Her hair had escaped its clip in the back, a few strands brushing her cheek. I wanted to reach out and tuck them back, but my hands stayed in my pockets. I moved closer to the counter, closer than usual. She looked up, just for a moment, and I thought I saw hesitation flicker across her eyes. A glance away, then back. Then, suddenly, someone came in, a regular, cheerful, oblivious. She smiled and turned her attention to them, her shoulders easing, and the moment between us fractured. I sat at a table, stirring my tea without thinking. Every clink of the spoon echoed louder than it should. I wanted to say something, anything, to hold on to the thread that had been stretched so thin, but the words got caught in my throat. She returned to the counter after the customer left. We didn't speak. I noticed the way she tapped her fingers against the wood, the subtle shift of her weight from one foot to the other. Small things, but to me they were signals, pauses in a conversation we hadn't started. I tried a joke about the rain, fumbling it, and she gave a small laugh. Not her usual warmth, just a flicker. And it was enough to make me want to lean closer, to feel it again, to test the gravity between us. I imagined her hand brushing mine as she passed with a plate, the space between us charged and electric. My pulse jumped when her hand did hover a fraction too long, as if caught mid-motion, then pulled back. A near touch, nothing more, but enough to set the room spinning. "You know," I started, voice low, hesitant, then stopped. Couldn't finish. Too many things unsaid. She looked at me, eyes soft but guarded. Yeah, she prompted. A pause. I wanted to say, I've missed this. I've missed you. But instead, I just nodded, and the words hung unspoken in the space between us. The clock ticked. Outside, the rain fell harder, tapping against the window. Our eyes met for a heartbeat too long, a silent recognition of what could be, what maybe shouldn't. I thought about leaning in, just a little, feeling her close, letting the past and present blur. My chest tightened. Her lips parted, as if she might say something or do something. But then the bell above the door rang. Another customer. She looked up, smiled faintly, and turned. I stayed still, staring at my tea, heart racing. The near kiss, the near confession, they lingered like a shadow, heavier than any words. And I realized I couldn't tell if it was fear or restraint keeping us apart. I found her on the park bench near the corner of the street, just past 6 again, the city muted in gray light. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and damp leaves, the sort of smell that makes you think about things you usually ignore. She was holding a paper cup of tea, one hand cupped over it, the other resting on her knee. Hey, I said, unsure if I should sit or stand. She tilted her head, watching the clouds drift low over the rooftops. Hey, she said back. Pause. You came. I sat. Not too close, but close enough that our shoulders nearly brushed. My chest felt heavy, and I realized I'd been holding my breath without knowing it. We didn't speak for a moment. I watched her fingers trace the rim of the cup. She glanced at me once, then away. I noticed a flicker in her eyes, something like hesitation or worry. I saw you with him the other day, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, neutral, but there was an edge beneath it I couldn't ignore. The guy at the bookstore. Talking about work? I stiffened. Oh, yeah, just small talk. My hands curled around the bench, knuckles white. I wanted to explain. I wanted to say it meant nothing. But somehow, even saying that aloud would sound like a confession. She looked down, sipped her tea, and then met my eyes again. I don't like seeing you with anyone else. Even if it's nothing. Her words came out softer than she meant, I think. Trembling, maybe. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to brush a strand of hair from her face, but the words stuck, thick in my throat. Instead, I just leaned forward slightly, letting the space between us shrink, feeling the warmth of her hand near mine. I don't know what I want, I admitted. My voice sounded small, fragile, even to me. I know I want to be here, with you. And I keep imagining. I trailed off, because saying it would change everything. She didn't answer. Just let the pause stretch, letting the city hum around us, letting her presence fill the quiet spaces inside me. I caught a shiver, not from the wind, I realized, but from the weight of what neither of us had dared say before. Her fingers brushed mine by accident, or maybe on purpose. A fleeting touch, barely there, but it sent something deep through me. I could feel her hesitate, pull back slightly, then stay. The tension in her chest mirrored mine. Do you ever wonder if it's wrong? I asked finally, voice low. Not a joke, not rhetorical, really asking. She looked down at her tea, stirred it slowly, and met my eyes again. Her lips pressed together, uncertain. Her hand twitched. I saw her breathing catch, a fraction of a second, and I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. The question hung between us, heavier than rain clouds, unspoken answers trembling in the air. I wanted to close the distance, wanted to bridge it with everything I'd been holding back. But I stayed still, waiting, letting the quiet pull at us both. And I wondered, would she lean in first, or would I have to? The next week, she was different. Not obvious, not dramatic, just quieter. Her smiles were smaller, her hands lingered less on the counter. I showed up at the cafe one Wednesday, the same time I always did, and she didn't look up when I came in. Coffee? I asked, and she nodded once, without saying anything else. Her eyes avoided mine as she poured. My stomach tightened. Something had shifted, but I couldn't name it. I sat with my cup, pretending to scroll through my phone, but the screen was blank. I kept glancing at her, at the faint crease between her brows, at the slight slump of her shoulders. The energy I had been clinging to was gone, replaced with this quiet distance I couldn't cross. Later, I saw her from across the street. She was talking to a man, older, his hand brushing her arm lightly. I wanted to look away. I didn't. My chest tightened, a slow ache that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with not knowing. I tried calling her that evening. The phone rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. I left a message, careful not to sound desperate. Hey, just checking if you're okay. Nothing. The next day, I walked by the cafe. The seat where I usually sat was empty, her hands folded neatly on the counter as she served other customers. She looked through me, and I realized I was invisible, and it stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. I imagined all sorts of scenarios. Maybe she was seeing someone. Maybe she regretted our last week together. Maybe she decided I was too young, too naive, too not enough. Every possibility was a punch to the chest. I didn't text again. I couldn't. Every word I could have written felt wrong, inadequate, too much or too little. The draft messages stayed unsent, each one a fragment of hope I couldn't bear to release. I noticed her ring, same one, same hand, but now it felt heavier somehow, like a marker of boundaries I hadn't crossed yet. And still, I wanted to cross them. Wanted to knock on her door, ask her what she was thinking, what she wanted, if any of this had mattered to her. But I didn't. Instead, I lingered outside the cafe, watching the steam curl from her teacups, the way her hair caught the late afternoon light. Watching without touching, without interfering, feeling the quiet pull between us stretch thinner. The twist of her distance left me hollow, but not broken. My chest ached in a muted rhythm, like a paused heartbeat, suspended between hope and resignation. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I walked away, leaving the seat empty, leaving the draft messages unsent, leaving myself suspended in the quiet afterglow of what had almost been. I found her in the kitchen of the cafe after closing, the lights dim, the sound of the street muffled behind the glass. She was wiping down the counter, sleeves rolled up, the steam from the kettle curling around her hands. The air smelled faintly of tea and lemon cleaner, ordinary and intimate at once. I hesitated at the doorway. The words I had rehearsed 1,000 times clung to the back of my throat, but they felt too heavy, too fragile to release all at once. "You stayed late," she said without looking up. Her voice was neutral, but the tilt of her head betrayed something like curiosity, maybe worry. I trailed off, unsure if I could say it. Wanted to see you. Wanted to ask. Wanted to risk everything. She turned, slow, careful, eyes catching mine. There was a pause, the kind that swells between 2 people who know too much about each other already. Her hand hovered over a cup, then set it down. "Are you upset?" I asked, voice soft. Not accusing, just trying to name the thing I could feel between us. "I don't know," she admitted. The admission was quiet, almost swallowed by the dim light, but it felt bigger than any declaration I could make. She exhaled slowly, and I realized she had been holding something back, some weight I hadn't known to notice. I stepped closer, just a little, careful not to crowd her, careful not to scare the fragile thing between us. "I didn't want to lose this," I said finally. "Whatever this is." Her gaze softened, and for the first time in days, I saw her without the distance, the wall she'd erected like a quiet fortress. "I didn't either," she said. Pause. "But it's complicated." "Everything is," I whispered. And somehow, saying it aloud made it less frightening. We didn't need to list the reasons, the gap in our ages, the past we carried, the things we hadn't said. They were all there, silent but understood. We moved slowly, unconsciously closing the small space between us. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for a towel. A flicker of contact, a quiet tether that anchored us in the present. I didn't pull away. "Okay," she said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. I smiled back. A slow, Gentle acknowledgement that we were both here, fragile, unguarded, feeling the weight of our choices without needing to name them. The kettle hissed. Steam rose. The city hummed outside. And in that ordinary kitchen, with the ordinary smells and sounds, it felt like the quietest sort of victory. We didn't need more than that. A touch of a hand, a shared glance, a soft, okay. That was enough. Weeks passed, then months. I stopped timing my visits, stopped measuring them against some invisible clock. Some mornings I'd arrive at 8:47 a.m., the cafe quiet, steam rising from a cup of black coffee, the same one she used to make for me when I was a kid. Other days, I'd walk past and see her arranging chairs or chatting with someone else, and I'd smile quietly to myself. She was still careful, still aware of the distance life had imposed, but the tension had eased. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden turning point, just a slow unfolding, like leaves opening in the early sun. One Wednesday, we ended up on the park bench again. Not by plan, not by chance. It was just where we sat, where we had sat for weeks, letting words come and go in fragments, letting silences speak louder than sentences. I brought tea. She brought the quiet warmth of familiarity. You remember that day? I asked, nodding toward the puddle from last week's rainstorm, the one where we'd laughed at our reflection in the water. She smiled, eyes soft. I do. You slipped and got soaked, and I had to lend you my jacket. I laughed softly. You didn't have to. You wanted to. She shrugged, but the corners of her lips lifted. Maybe. There was a pause, long enough for the sun to shift, for leaves to tremble in the breeze, for the city to hum around us. We didn't need more. A hand brushed my own, this time intentionally, fingers lingering in that quiet rhythm we'd found over months of tentative steps. Life wasn't perfect. Bills still piled on the counter. The kettle still hissed. Her routine still pulled her one way, mine another. But the warmth between us had settled in, ordinary and deep. It didn't need grand gestures or poetic lines. It just existed in black coffee and tea cups, in pauses and half-smiles, in the space between our shoulders on the park bench. One evening, I found her looking out the cafe window, her hand wrapped around a mug, the golden light catching her hair. I wanted to tell her everything, how much I'd imagined her, how much I'd feared losing her, but the words weren't necessary. She knew. I knew. We just sat there, side by side, letting the quietness carry us. No declarations, no fireworks, just the steady, earned rhythm of two people who had found their way without rushing. And in that silence, I realized something I could never fully put into words: the comfort of being seen, the warmth of being understood, the ache of longing met with gentle reciprocity. It was ours, fragile and real, and it was enough. As I sipped my coffee, I glanced at her and caught that faint, knowing smile. Only we understood it, the small victories, the unspoken apologies, the careful patience that had brought us here. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?